Welcome to Relay Chain, a podcast produced by Parity Technologies where we discuss all things Substrates, Polkadot, and Web3. Today we have Jasmine Zhang from IOSG Ventures. Do you want to introduce yourself, Jasmine?
So I'm venture partner from IOSG Venture. I joined actually the team last year in October. Before that, I was actually working for another investor, also invested in Polkadot. And actually I grew up in China. I studied and worked in London. And then in 2015, I moved to Berlin. So my background is in mathematics and statistics. My first few jobs has been in investment banking and consulting related, especially in automobile industry and internet industry. And ever since I moved to Berlin, I've been working with startups very closely. And then in 2017, actually, I started to get into Bitcoin and cryptocurrency related, started to find out what blockchain technology can actually drive us to. So, that is the start of my career basically in crypto scene.
Yeah, so you obviously have a lot of background in math and finance, and so you could do a lot of things. So why are you investing in Web3 and what's your thesis around investing in Web3?
Yeah, I think definitely Web3 has been a very hot topic. I think among a lot of VCs, we share similar views on that. So for IOSG, one of the important focus of the field we are looking at is also Web 3.0. I think this is kind of a field where no one really have a very clear definition. How do you define it?
Yeah, I was going to ask you, how do you define Web3?
Right. Yeah. I think it's a really interesting question. Every time I got this kind of questions, I always ask myself, try to also improvise it and then try to use a very intuitive way to explain what is it. So for me, I think it really helps to understand it. If we look at the timeline, if we look at Web 1, Web 2, and then we can maybe have a easier time understanding it. So for me, for example, Web 1, it means to read and obtain information very passively. And for Web 2, it is read and write, and also you can interact very freely with the other side of the world. So I think at the moment we are living in the Web 2, where most of the companies or the applications we are using every day is among this field. So imagine the way I come here, I wake up and I use Google to check the weather of today. I took a Uber to come here, and then whenever I want to have a food delivery, I go to Delivery Hero. I go to Meituan from China, for example. If I want to send information, send news, and to have some social contact with friends, I go with WhatsApp, WeChat, Facebook, and so on. And if I want to go to buy goods and so on, I go to Amazon, Alibaba, Taobao, and so on. So it definitely brings more convenience to our daily life, and you just feel you cannot really live without these kind of applications every day,
because you're interacting with them.
Exactly, all the time you interact with each other. On the other hand, you also feel okay, so at the end of the day, they're all platforms. And then platforms, I think they create value by connecting the service providers and the end users, right? But they also try to maximize their profit, can one day expand their commission fees from the two sides. So you are kind of taking advantage of by them in a certain way. And then you see they started to enter every part of your life, and then they become super huge. They become giant, have more money, have more capital, have more data that is actually generated by us, the end users, and then they can use all of these resources to keep building their monopoly world.
Yeah, so when you think about the business models of Web 2 companies, where do you think Web 3 can come into that? Because you see that these companies are offering, they have kind of two halves to them. There's the good half, which is the matchmaking and service provider relationship, where that's a valuable service to provide this, but they're actually going to profit from using data and all the things that Web 3 kind of wants to take away from them.
Yeah.
And so how do you see the shift happening where we can still provide the valuable matchmaking services, but without the other half of where they're making all of their revenue?
Yeah, I think if you compare with Web 1, like Web 2 definitely is superior of it. I mean, it definitely increased the efficiency of the whole industry because like with like Web 1, probably like you have to go to find all of these people who can in the end provide you like all of these services. But with Web 2, I mean, they put like everyone together in one system. But as you said, you also like try to, get like more profit out of like the both sides. And then like in the end, pick them like the huge defendable like moats by having like this strong like networks effect and high like replacement like cost. So it's like I think it's really hard to like like now to have these companies like fail like in some way. They just become like too big to die. And then like in a way like when they become like really like a monopoly, I think they are also trying to like also being monopoly in the fields like they were at the very start, not really begin with. They are trying to like go into like penetrate into every part of life. They go to artificial intelligence. They go to like all different fields like we may interact like every day. And I think that is like the time where people started to think whether there is like another solution like for it, like one. All of these like profits like you have in the end like by yourself generated, whether you can actually used and controlled by yourself. And I think for me that is like very naturally like think of like okay, Web 1, Web 2, and then for Web 3, it is like a new way, like a more personalized ways like to share your data, to be your own boss of the data. Like so you have like the ownership of your data. It's gonna be like more open, more transparent, and more fair.
Zuboff talked about this in the age of surveillance capitalism. Like you mentioned that these companies have the moats around their data, and that like a lot of like modern economic theory is based around this idea that everybody's kind of like equally ignorant and you just kind of follow your own incentives. And then like Google and Facebook kind of break this whole paradigm of like, it breaks the assumptions of the like economic system because you don't have everybody being equally ignorant. You have just like a few people who have all of this data. Like it seems like with this Web3 stuff, you can like...
It's like really something like people started to think of like they should have like the equal right.
The same tools.
Yeah, exactly. So like with the data, with the resources, with like the few in 21st century, like people, human, like end users are generating, should be also like share the amount of like a profit like actually in the end get generated. So I think people started to really like when the civilization come to like another level, people started to think like also in their own like as an individual like what it kind of like right I could still really get like from the traditional like business models. So I think that is why like with like the rise of like Web3, it got like so much like attention.
Yeah. So in Web3, like we have blockchain, of course, and then like you mentioned AI. Is IOSG invested in non-blockchain projects that you also see as being related to Web3?
We actually only invested in like a blockchain like related projects. I think with blockchain, it is already a very comprehensive like a field. It kind of like connect mathematics with cryptography, with psychology, with philosophy, like like all like in together. So we try to be like also really focused to be able to like like dig out the research, doing more research like on what is like a blockchain can really lead us like a different future or something. So that's why we only like invest in blockchain related like projects.
Yeah, sure. And even within blockchain, there's a lot of layers to it that you can talk about and get involved with, from like like you said, like the cryptography all the way at the bottom, and then like the higher level applications to how you actually use it.
I think like before, like you mentioned like about this like a non-blockchain related projects. I think like before, maybe a few years ago, like one Facebook having like this social graph, it kind of like in the direction like they wanted to. It's still like AI like algorithm like driven methodology that they put like people's likes, people's comment, like into one kind of like a package, and then with like this package, like other like a system can already kind of define like what kind of person like you are, what kind of answers like you can give, and so on. So it's like a package you have, and then like maybe like when you have like a certain API, you can just like with your like this Facebook ID, and then you can just plug it into like another website, and then like this website will also automatically have all of the data like if you want to share freely or you want to get like benefit from it. So I think it was kind of like in this direction, but I didn't follow it like afterwards. But I think it's like something quite inspiring.
So yeah, if we start talking about like the application stuff of blockchain, like you've done a lot of research on prediction markets and like DeFi. How do you see these changing finance?
I think it is important to like not doing like DeFi because we want to decentralize it. Rather, like we want to provide like a more open and permissionless like ecosystem for the financial
I agree
systems,
with this
right?
semantic that open is a much better word than decentralized for this.
Yeah. So I think like open is like really important because like people, I think tend to forget like actually like there are 2 to 3% of people in Southeast Asia like they only like this amount of people they have a credit card, and like in the worldwide there's like 30% of people don't really have access to a bank account. I think like it's kind of like hard to imagine like for people living in like developed countries, you have to like put yourself into their like a situation. I think like it's really like a strong like need like for them to actually enter like this financial like system. I mean, let alone the people like living in, for example, like Latin America and so on, because of the politician like situation or some other reasons, like and their currency become like depreciated because of inflation and other reasons. So there is like this strong like need, I think, for restructuring like this financial like system, and that's why like we think that is where the technology should come in. That is where like the disruption like should actually come in.
Yeah.
So you have to like lower like the barriers and to be able to have more people to come into like this like ecosystem. And I think that is how you in the end automatically increase like the efficiency of the whole industry.
Yeah, and there's like two issues here. One is like people who don't have access to banking or like financial services at all, and the other is people who do, but those systems are incredibly corrupt or
Exactly.
you can't trust them.
Yeah.
And so like how do you get people like first access, and then how do you make sure that they have access to credible systems?
Yeah. So that's why like I think it's if you consider like how difficult it is to reconstruct it, I think you can kind of like also imagine like why like at the moment we still don't really have like a very functional cross-border like remittance like methodology or projects like in this field. You have to kind of like deal with like different parties like profit or benefit. You have to connect everyone to build like this trustful, stable, secure like infrastructure. So I think it is like going to be for sure like somewhere in the near like future, but I think it's definitely going to be something really meaningful and valuable like for the like people, especially in the third world country.
Yeah, and I also wanted to ask you about prediction markets.
Yeah.
And I guess like to some extent prediction markets already exist. Like if you look at credit default swaps or something like this is basically a prediction market that something's going to fail. It's just only available to a very select few people. And so if you start making prediction markets kind of for everything, how do you see that influencing society, or like what is the benefit or what are the risks also of doing that?
Mm-hmm. So I think like prediction like market like it's definitely a very interesting and kind of like underestimated like domain like in the DeFi or open finance world. If we look at like the total volume like locked in DeFi world, I see like the top 3 like project are actually like maker, synthetic and compound. I mean, all of them are actually like in the lending and borrowing like field, and then like with prediction market, they actually only have like I think like less than like 1% of the total volume locked over there. So I think it's kind of like underestimated, especially when you think of like how much volume is actually how much. It just makes sense to have like a prediction market. I think for me like the first time like, when I looked into like a prediction market, it was because of this paper like published by Friedrich Hayek in 1945, right? This like the knowledge of the society, and it was just like so true because he mentioned also like pointed out like a centralized authority will just never beat the efficiency of like a decentralized economy, and then like because like the knowledge is actually unevenly like dispersed among the whole humanity, and only if you can combine them, you can have actually a better decision to be made.
Yeah, and this was exactly what Zuboff was talking about. She like called out Hayek specifically that his principles are often cited by big tech companies to say that like, oh, this should be completely free and unregulated. But in fact, their model breaks the Hayekian assumptions that this is evenly distributed and like decentralized around society.
Yeah, so I think the first step is like really important. Like you understand like there's a meaning like for prediction market to be existed, and then like you look at the centralized like prediction market. So first of all, it is like centralized, so it is not transparent. You have like different kind of a risk among it, and secondly, it can be shut down like at any moment by any government. So we have actually already an example, right? We have this like, I think this prediction market launched in Europe, in Ireland. It's called InTrade. It was kind of like forbidden for Americans to use it in 2012. The American government was saying like it's kind of like economic reasons or something, but a lot of people suspect actually it is like more in the politician like reasons, because like there are some of the markets like they have created, they actually have been focusing on the regional elections, and they have been just much more like a precise than the ones happening like over there. So
yeah, America tends to be a little bit Puritan when it comes to this stuff.
Yeah, so like you kind of like as a centralized as a prediction market, you have this risk to be kind of like facing to be forced to shut down like your business and so on. And then there will be like also like probably like also less transaction fees like if you are using like a decentralized traditional market. But I think like it's like when I try to like also try a few like applications from like a decentralized prediction market, I think it's also like really facing a lot of challenges. Even though like I'm in this space, I know some like basic ideas, but still it's kind of hard. So I can, for example, like just explain a bit of my journey if I use, for example, Augur, right? So when I started it, I think if I imagine myself as someone like doesn't really know how that works and so on, I need to already expect myself to have like a function like a crypto wallet. I need to be able to buy like all of those tokens like Ether and reputation tokens like on the exchanges, and I have to be able to like move them around, and I have to like with like all of these like steps, it's already probably will like get some people like away from using it, because it's just like not that easy. Like I think it's a general problem. It's just like not only within Augur. I think it's a general problem. The learning is still like education is still like needed in the blockchain application like projects. And for like secondly, if I want to like create a market, I think that the mechanism of like creating a market is really not that intuitive. It was not that easy. You have to like stake your Ether, and then you have to also stake like your REP, so that you can able to like attribute like reporters like afterwards, and then like you get this amount of like a staked token just 100% back when everything goes right. But in the meantime, actually you also lost your opportunity cost, right? Especially I think in the first version, the resolution time is like 7 days. Like you have 7 days time, you can probably use it. You can like stake it into like a maker and try to get maybe some interest rate like out of it. So kind of like missing also the financial incentive to create this market, let alone like the difficult mechanisms of creating a market. So this is like the second step, like I was like trying to conquer like over there. And thirdly, I think it's a liquidity like a problem. I think liquidity just it's really hard. It's like if you want to like have actually like more liquidity like in the market, you have to maybe bring more entertaining like scenarios. But when you have the entertaining like scenarios, you kind of lead it to like the betting or gambling, like something just closer to getting like money out of it, right? And then like you face a challenge of jurisdiction, and they tell you cannot do that, something like that. So it's kind of like challenge, like how do you get over like with it, right? I mean, now like they have like 0x like added and so on. So I would also like expect like their version 2 like to be like much like fluent, like smooth like with it. But I think it's still like really hard like to solve the liquidity problem.
Yeah, I think like a lot of the experience and like learning and those problems are going to get sorted as the technology develops. And ideally, you don't really have to teach people how to use it. Like a 5-year-old should be able to use like a smartphone app and figure out what to do with it. But I'm actually like interested in what there should be prediction markets for. Like we could be like more entertaining, but there's a difference of like, well, is entertaining necessarily good or valuable?
Yeah, I think I think entertaining will definitely bring some people in I think it's like bring like more like liquidation in. So like if you are for sure, like you can think of like a different kind of like entertaining like scenarios, but like a specific kind that is really, not so much like facing challenges from like jurisdictions, but also be able to attract people to come in. I just don't know like such a scenario yet. I mean, for sure there are smarter people can think of, but I just like at the moment I don't know what would be like the answer like actually towards it. But I think like the most difficult thing is still like lies in the resolution time, because if you go with like a centralized like a prediction market, it is almost like as soon as the event finished, you have like a clear like almost immediate like resolution time. But I think with the decentralized ones, because sometimes like you just need to use like oracles like to be involved, and like for some like events, it's just not that easy to use like even much more advanced artificial intelligence to catch the data. You need somehow still like the involvement of people, which is like the so-called reporters, right? But I think as soon as you have people inside, you will also introduce like more challenges, because people are just complicated. It's like we are playing like game theory like all the time. There will be the problems like surrounding the honest answers. What if you actually like get more paid? Like if you provide like a wrong answer, then you provide a right answer. I mean, even though in the end you will be maybe reported and so on, but it's still like damage like the network of the platform, right?
Yeah.
And then like secondly, if you have it, like what about like this kind of like retirement attack? What if these people just don't care about this anymore? They just if I lost my reputation by giving a wrong answer, I would just leave the platform like forever and not going to coming back anymore. So what does it like influence me? And I think the third like a difficulty would be how to really match the kind of like a event with the kind of like the reporters like who are actually in this field, how to like make it more efficient for them to find the kind of reporters would be more suitable like for this event like consequence.
Yeah, because with a centralized system, you're basically like offloading that trust to the to decide what the outcome was.
Exactly. And also like you have just like this centralized authorization like to do like all of this stuff. So it is efficient, but of course on the other hand, like you introduce like other problems.
Yeah. So unless like when prediction markets relate to open finance, how do you what's the value or benefit of having prediction markets? What like edge does that give or enhancement?
I think like as I said like earlier, I think it's definitely like a field that is underestimated like at the moment. I think like at the moment like most of the like open finance like DeFi projects, they are in the borrowing and lending like field, but it can be like something quite dangerous like in a way, because most people are trying to speculating like from it. What if like one day, like the token price got really volatile and like people's account started to be burned, and then like, people will just like leave this like platform and go for something else. So I think it would be like actually necessary to introduce like more new like a real world asset like on the blockchain. So not just like a borrowing and lending, rather like how to like tokenize some of the existing like a financial instruments like on the blockchain. And I think it would be also like necessary to have the decentralized insurance. So I think like for a lot of institutions, there will be like some hesitation like for them to enter. So first of all, for sure, it's still like the UI UX. It's not that easy. It's not that intuitive like to go in. But secondly, I think it's also like how they are going to dealing with the interest rate they are getting or the profit they are getting from these like DeFi open finance like projects. And thirdly would be there doesn't really have like a hedging product in the market yet. So like if you compare with like the traditional market, we see like different hedging tools. We see different like swaps, we see different like CDOs and so on. I think that is something like, a more comprehensive, more complex like a financial system. I see like this trend like also being replicated like in the decentralized world, but I think it might be like something like that is going to be boom like in 2020, and that is also something like we hope to see like more projects like in the decentralized insurance like hedging instrument tool.
Yeah, and a lot of these like lending protocols are the foundation of hedging instruments. I mean, in order to do a short sale, you need to have a lending protocol behind it.
Yeah.
So I want to transition a little bit from like the DeFi or open finance and Web3 stuff into more like valuation because, I mean, blockchain investment funds are quite new, but investment funds are not. And so there's a lot of like historical valuation models for like public companies or private companies, like just kind of cash flow. And those don't necessarily apply to a protocol like Polkadot. And so how do you go about valuing one of these protocols?
I think it's really, really tough question. I mean, this has been the things like we have been doing a lot of research on, but still like now, I think it's really hard to give like a very like defined or very clear answer like to solve this problem. Because like for the traditional like ways to evaluate like the projects, you can use like the DCFs, like discounted like cash flows to evaluate like a company when the company have a very clear like cash flow business model. But I think like at the moment it's like really rare to see like a blockchain projects like having like such a clear like business model. So it brings so much like a difficulty in evaluating it. So besides like just to compare with traditional way to look at the projects, like we look at the team, look at the founders, look at the business models, look if they have, look at the technology, look at the tractions, the market, and so on. So we also like try to see like whether the blockchain projects using like their token and the token can function well and also capture the value. I think it's really important because a lot of times you have like blockchain projects, they have the tokens, but like they just doesn't really have a necessary use. You don't really need to have like such a token to be in your system. And if you have like a token, whether you can incentivize everyone to have like a aligned interest with it, and then like whether this token can really capture like any like added value like you have like for this industry. I think that is really something we are trying to figure out and to put into like the model like we evaluate the projects.
Yeah, and I guess you can extend that to like there are going to be tools around blockchain for developers and also like applications that are built on blockchain but that don't have a token, right?
Yeah.
And so how do you go about evaluating like one of these companies that says like, hey, we're going to build our application on Polkadot, but we're not going to have our own token? How do you value something that's on something else that you don't really know how to value?
So I think like most of the value of like the apps, like who, for example, like building on Polkadot, the value gonna be mostly shown like from the Polkadot valuation. I think for the apps, it would be like important like to look at like their market they are targeting at if they don't have the token at all. So to look at their market share, that would be like important.
Yeah. Like one of the things I wanted to ask you about was like the opportunity that you see with blockchain interoperability, but it kind of relates to like, I guess this question relates to my own opinion, which is composability. And that's that like you could have an application that doesn't have a blockchain itself, but that it's using blockchain. So it might like use an identity chain as its sign-on. It might use like a stablecoin chain for payments. It might use like a decentralized exchange to operate its other tokens and just present like a single interface to the user. And so you could actually have like an application that's built on blockchain, but it doesn't have a blockchain itself. I guess how would you think about a company like that?
Do you mean like kind of like consortiums, like these kind of companies?
No, not a consortium, but like...
What would be like an example like of it?
Well, there are no examples on blockchain. Okay. That's what I hope will happen with Polkadot. But yeah, I mean, if you just look at like a Web 2 example, like you could have Airbnb that uses like some identity service for its sign-on, and it uses PayPal to do its payments.
Yeah.
And it could use like another like file storage system for like hosting all the pictures of the apartments or something, right? Yeah. Like you do the same thing on blockchain where you're using these different, where just like the payment system is on blockchain and the sign-on system is on blockchain. Mm-hmm. But the actual application itself doesn't have its own blockchain. It's just composed of all these other blockchain apps.
So that would be probably like the mission of like what Polkadot is going to like build or like provide with, right?
Yes.
I think Polkadot is like really like for us like as like early stage investor and also like lead investor in the second round. I think like we do really have like a huge like belief and a huge expectation of like what Polkadot is gonna be like a build like provide, you know, like to the whole blockchain industry. I think we like to like compare like Polkadot to the whole blockchain ecosystem. Like the TCP/IP towards the internet like field. So you need like this kind of like underlying like protocols, like infrastructure agreement, so that you can have like a more prosperous like ecosystem. I really like what Substrate is doing. I think it's like a very long-sighted like product, like Polkadot team is like doing, so that people can at the same time, like at the first moment when they started to use like a Substrate, it got connected to the Polkadot like a relay chain, and then it can immediately share like the interoperability and also the pooled security. So I think it gives like also actually like more people with like a traditional industrial like background like more freedom or like more time to think about like some specific use cases, because people have been like kind of like distracted, or they have to focus on this like trilemma like in the blockchain technology, right? And they have to take care of like the scalability, they have to take care of like the decentralization and also the security. But with like like this ecosystem like Polkadot is like providing, so they can have like more time to think of like some more intuitive like interesting use cases like based on the like industrial like knowledge they have gathered for their professional like background. So I think that is really like something like we are hoping to see like in the upcoming like years, especially like this year, Polkadot is going to like have a mainnet live. So we're excited like as well.
Yeah, hopefully in a few weeks.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's news. Yeah.
So maybe by the time we release this, there will be a Polkadot mainnet.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So the last thing I wanted to talk about was that so IOSG is like mostly a Chinese team, but you're quite invested in the German blockchain area, and you're full-time in Berlin.
Yeah.
And so like, could you just discuss like why there's a huge blockchain scene in Asia? Like what made you come to Germany and Berlin specifically to focus on this?
I think like at the moment, if you just take a very general look at the whole world, like a blockchain scene, I mean, Germany, China, like Asia, and America is definitely the places like you should not miss. And then like we actually have already like 2 offices like in Asia and the States, and we want to actually like be also very closer to the German blockchain scene, because we just see huge potential. A lot of projects we have invested in actually are in the like German like blockchain ecosystem. So I tend to be like also often like asked, how do you compare with the 2 ecosystem between Germany and Asia, like China? I would say I think like both places, they have like really crazy smart people, have really interesting like projects, and have a lot of universities like providing like blockchain related courses, and also keep sending the talents to the space. But also like I see like a very obvious like difference like between these 2 is that I think like for me, I think especially after 5 years like stay in Berlin, I see like especially in blockchain scene, I think most of the projects are actually very tech-driven and community-driven. And then like in China, it is more capital-driven and led by the government. So to explain it, I think like if you are in Berlin, a lot of like projects, they do very often they host like different like workshops. They have like different events, and then most of the times, I think like the ones at least I have visited, mostly like talk a lot about like technology, how they have achieved like all of the development like in this field. And here like apparently it's just like such a paradise for developers. You see like developers coming from all over the world. It's such a great like chemistry like here, like feels so energetic. And then like I think in China it's like kind of like different in a way that capital driven. What I meant is like I think Chinese projects are kind of, most of them actually quite realistic. Like they see like where the capital is, they see where could it have like very clear like business models, and then like most of projects are actually in those fields. Because if you see like think of like the kind of projects like this having a very clear like cash flows, for example like the mining pools, exchanges, like this kind, you can think of like most of them actually Chinese companies, or like operated by like Chinese companies, so operated by Chinese like people like doing this. So I think they can tend to like gather around like where the capital like is, try to like also make money and out of it and so on. But it's also like on the other hand, it has like also very live like community scene. It's just like not as big, for example, here, or not as obvious as here. And then like secondly, I think like in like China, it is quite led by government. I think like especially like last year, one President Xi like mentioned like to take blockchain as a big breakthrough. I think you can really see a lot of companies, corporates, institutions they started to like figure out or trying to like find like different ways to work with like blockchain technology. They try to like find out what blockchain technology can actually add value to their like current business. So like you see like Tencent, you see like Alibaba, they have been doing like different like stuff like with like a blockchain. So I think it's kind of like also very efficient like in this way because it's led by the government. Government encourage corporates, encourage like projects to discover more.
So it's more top down.
Yeah, it is more top-down like approach, I would say. But here, I think like the government is also like trying. They published like the national blockchain strategy, like I think last year, and trying to be like also taking a more important role like to here. But I think they could still do a bit more because it's such a great place. Like in Berlin, have a great community, great like smart people, really great projects, and I think they would deserve like more support from government side as well.
Yeah, it goes a little bit the opposite direction here in Germany. You have to kind of like, it comes from the bottom up that you have to then like kind of approach them and convince the government that this is a good...
Yeah, but I think it can be like also really energetic in a way that we think maybe like the next killer app gonna be actually grab or initiated by the community. So this application has to be originated, have like a customer base. So you have to think about like how to make your user be happy, how to really provide like a privacy to the user. So if you are closer to the community, I think you can be also like more just full of ideas like with it. So it would be like also great. Have a just, I think, different atmosphere, different like ecosystem. You can also find different like opportunities out of it.
Yeah, that's like a big thing in Berlin. There's so many meetups and community events, and like there's no talk ever about like the prices and tokens and stuff. Like
I felt so much calm down like when I'm here because I'm just like I think the first few times like when I visited a few like blockchain meetups here, there were a few times we were talking a bit of the like a token price, and suddenly I felt like kind of get dispersed. Like, what are you talking about? Like, no token price. We just like want to focus on our technology and so on. So it's just like very pure like atmosphere. I think it can keep people to be focused on what they want to like build.
Yeah, even like within Europe, it's like a very small group because like I came here from France and like in France, everybody's just talking about like ICOs and prices and everything. And then I came here and it was like, never talk about this. We only talk about technology. Yeah.
So I think it's definitely a great like atmosphere. I'm just very happy to be able to like, travel around between these two big markets. And we're just looking forward to see like more opportunities actually also here in Germany.
Yeah. So I think we'll wrap it up here. Is there anywhere that people should go if they want to get in touch with you or IOSG?
I put my email address like over there so like people can reach out.
All right. Sounds great. We'll put it in the notes.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Relay Chain. We'd love to keep in touch. Follow us on Twitter at RelayChain or email podcast@parity.io. Our team at Parity includes some of the leading peer-to-peer networking developers, consensus algorithm inventors, blockchain innovators, and Rust developers. If you want to learn more about our work or want to work with us, visit our website at parity.io and sign up for our newsletter at parity.io/newsletter.